right, guys. So we discussed last week that we were going to start a top 11 tournament, and we actually recorded this episode last Wednesday. And, of course, then all the news hit with the coronavirus and the quarantining, and everything kind of went up in the air for a little bit there. But we have decided that we are going to continue doing our top 11 tournament because it's just fun. And I think we could all use a little fun. So the GoldCast will continue. We will continue putting out gold dives. We will continue with our top 11 tournament for March. And we are still going to be here delivering fun episodes and hopefully delivering all of you and ourselves a much-needed break from some of the intense situations going on worldwide. So wherever you are, just know that we are keeping you in our thoughts and prayers. We hope you're staying safe. We hope you're staying responsible. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And hopefully this episode can give you a little bit of a reprieve and a little bit of a break of everything going on worldwide. So here it is, our top 11 episodes, top 11 49er games of the decade coming right up. Today's episode of the Top 11 podcast is sponsored by our very first Top 11 tournament. And Candlestick Will, I'm going to throw the mic to you. Why don't you explain to the people what the next month is going to look like for Top 11?
Oh, okay, so we're going to do it big here. Let's see. So we got today's episode is going to be the 49ers games of the decade. And then we're going to follow that up with the other two teams from the Bay. So we'll go with the top 11 Warrior games of the decade, followed by the top 11 Giants games of the decade. And then we'll wrap all that up with the top 11 Bay Area games of the decade. So taking all three teams into consideration, what are the best games of the 2010s?
Yeah, I cannot wait. This is going to be good. Raymond, why don't you let them know where can they find us?
You can always like us on Facebook.com/TheGoldCast, and you can also follow us on Twitter at @the_GoldCast, and be sure to subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher, all under the same moniker of The GoldCast. Like, subscribe, and comment because we like to hear from you, and we certainly want to get your take on this week's Top 11 episode.
Yeah, Top 11 podcast, one of our sister podcasts of the GoldCast, and we've got such a good one coming up. Candlestick Will, why don't you let them know where can they find the Top 11 podcast?
Trying to keep it simple, man. It's on Twitter at Top 11 Podcast, Top 11 Podcast.
Yeah, and then Candlestick Will, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Candlestick Will.
Ray, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ray Solis and Instagram at RaySolis1.
Yeah, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter with my brand new handle. I am Rudy 3rd, not Rudy 3. Rudy 3RD. I can't get that damn Rudy 3 yet, but hopefully I'll get famous enough to bump those people off and get I am Rudy 3. But you can find me at I am Rudy 3rd. All right. GoldCast is taking a break. We're here for our Top 11 podcast today. Huge episode. Huge. Now, here we go. The Top 11 greatest 49ers games of the past decade, of the 10s. This is going to be really fun, very tough, very difficult. But first, the greatest intro in the podcast game, the GoldCast. Let's go.
San Francisco, are you ready? This is the GoldCast.
Boom! Welcome to another edition of the I almost said the GoldCast, the Top 11 podcast. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the First, baby.
And our esteemed co-host,
Candlestick Will.
Boom! All right, gentlemen. here we go. Round 1 of our top 11 tournament. The 49ers enter the tournament first with the top 11 greatest games of the past 10 years. And as always, Candlestick Will, why don't you break down for the people how we present the game, how we present our top 11, because it is a little unique.
Yeah, so we'll each give our top 11, and we'll break it down into tiers. So we'll start with 11, 10, 9, and 8. So we'll get our bottom 4 on the list first. Then we'll announce 7, 6, 5, and 4. Then once we do that, we will shout out any honorable mentions that didn't make our list, and then end with the top 3, and end with the 3 best games of the decade.
Yeah, awesome. And so why don't we start with you, Raymond, and give us your 11 through 8.
Okay, so I've got Week 8 of the 2019 season, the 51-burger over Carolina. I've got the same season, Week 9, the very next week, the 28-25 game against Arizona. And then I have the same season, Week 14, just a few weeks later, the 48-46 against New Orleans.
Wow. All 2019 in the first 4.
All Shanny, baby.
All Shanny. Wow, we went full recency bias there. I like it. All right. My turn. At number 11, I have Oakland Raiders at the 49ers, Week 9, November 1st, 2018. I have at number 10, Seattle Seahawks at 49ers, Week 15, December 16, 2018. Week at number 9, Seattle Seahawks at the 49ers again, but this time Week 14, December 8, 2013. And I'll explain all these games when we get into that section. And then at number 8, the Green Bay Packers at the 49ers, NFC Championship, January 19th, 2020. Just from this past December.
All right. So for number 11, I have December 8th, 2013. Niners beat the Seahawks 19-17 at Candlestick. For number 10, I have January 12th, 2014 is Niners over Panthers at Carolina in the divisional round. For number 9, I have December 23rd, 2013, Niners over the Falcons at Candlestick. And for number 8, I have January 12th, 2013, the Niners over the Packers at Candlestick in the divisional round.
Ooh. So, Raymond, do you want to break down why you put those games in that order?
So any game, regular season games are not going to be featured in my top, just to give you a hint. So I went with everything before that is either, a lower, an earlier round playoff game or a regular season game. And, Week 8 versus Carolina was, us staying undefeated. I was also physically at that game with family and got to watch the Niners, really kind of hit a new stride going into the halfway point of this past season, and putting the 51-burger over Carolina, who at the time was, doing really well. It was, I think it was 7-0 versus like 4-2 or something like that, or 4-1. I forget because Cam Newton lost the first 2 games, and then they started the young kid who was 4-0 at the time. And he just kind of hit a rude awakening with the Niners and just really never recovered for the remainder of the season. He was really up and down. He was almost errorless up to that point in this first 4-game stretch. The quarterback for the Carolina Panthers, I even forget his name just because that's how uneventful he was. But he really struggled after that, and I think that was just a great game to watch in person and to just watch him put a romping. And then the next game, Week 9, the 28-25 against Arizona, that was really the Jimmy G coming out and really kind of proving that if the run game or if the offense was limited to one dimension, that Jimmy really was capable of carrying the team on his back, which he totally did in that game. And that was again another fun watch for them, or for me, just because Jimmy really aired it out, and I had faith in Jimmy, and he was 28 for 37 that game. He had 317 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, QBR of 136, and he was awesome. He was super, super awesome. Outside of, Kyler Murray's one big 80-yard pass, he was, that was just a great game, and it was just kind of like shushing the naysayers down. And then again in Week 14 against New Orleans, it's again Jimmy Garoppolo doing Jimmy Garoppolo things, and in a game where we were forced into a shootout. We didn't have a choice in the matter. That was the only way we were going to beat the Saints. And Jimmy once again put the team on his back and went toe to toe with Drew Brees. He had the one pick, but he had 300. He had the exact same yards as Drew Brees. But he was 26 for 35. So he was more efficient than Drew Brees, who was 29 for 40. He threw 4 touchdowns and 1 pick. Drew Brees did edge him in that category. He had 5 touchdowns, no picks. But outside of that, Jimmy really carried the team, and we bested the Saints by 2 points.
Okay. All right, Rudy, what about you?
So, number 11, I went Oakland Raiders at the 49ers, Week 9, November 1st, 2018. That was the very first one. The final battle of the Bay game. I chose this game because it was the last time the Niners and Raiders will ever play, both being in the Bay. Nick Mullins, it was his first start at QB. He was replacing C.J. Beathard, who was hurt at the time, and he absolutely destroyed the Raiders. And who are we kidding? We were garbage. Jimmy G was out. The whole season was basically done for. We'd only won 1 game prior to this game. And we just sent the Raiders packing 34-3, and just a wonderful way to send them off. Bye-bye, Oakland. See you later. Number 10, this is also in that same year, Seattle Seahawks at the 49ers. This was the Week 15 game. Mullins beats the streak. So Nick Mullins ends a 10-game losing streak that dates back all the way to us losing to the Hawks in the AFC Championship back in 2013. It was another game we didn't really have any business of winning, but it was just awesome. That was the final win of the season. It's the last game we won, and it was just great to see the Niners finally end the streak, the losing streak against the Seahawks. So that's why I put that at number 10. At number 9, the Seahawks 49ers Week 14 of December 8, 2013. This, to me, is the peak of the rivalry. The greatest rivalry of the last 10 years in football, without question, is the 49ers and Seahawks. And this is the game where the rivalry just explodes. Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson come to San Francisco in a final preview of what would be the NFC Championship of that year. It was an insanely brutal game. The two nastiest defenses in the league, and pretty much everyone believed that these two teams were going to duke it out in the NFC Championship, most likely, and that the winner of that game was probably going to take the whole thing. And this was all the way back in Week 14. We could already see this. It was a tough, brutal game. Niners squeak by 19-17. And then number 8, the NFC Championship from just this past January, the return of the 49ers back to greatness, a royal ass-whooping against the Green Bay Packers, a team we have just owned this entire decade anytime we've been good. And I saw this really as the coronation of Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, Robert Saleh. Final score 37-20. And so that's why I chose those games, mainly for their importance, just what they each signified as far as their place in the history of the last 10 years. Candlestick Will, what about you?
So number 11, I had the December 8 regular season game between the Niners and Seahawks in 2013. Niners were 8-4 coming in. Seahawks were 11-1. Niners beat them 19-17 on a Phil Dawson game-winning field goal with just 26 seconds left. Seahawks were up 1 with about 6.5 to go in the game. A huge play was Kaepernick to Vernon Davis, touchdown with 6 seconds left in the half. Was the only touchdown that day for the Niners. And, you're in Candlestick, you're 8-4, so you have to win this game against the Seahawks. And the Seahawks are 11-1, so it's not an easy task. So the fact that they could take on the best team in the NFC at the time and get a close win was huge. And that 2013 season, obviously, they were ended up getting in the playoffs and doing some big things. So that was a critical win for them that year. For number 10, I have the January 12th, 2014 game between the Niners and Panthers, 23-10 win against Carolina in Carolina. They were on the road despite having a much better record, or having a better record. The Niners were 13-4 coming in. I guess they were both 12-4 that year, and Niners were 13-4 though because they had to play in the wild card. And they had come off the road playing. They had a road playoff win in Green Bay in January. Obviously the week before, so you have that momentum going against Cam Newton and the Panthers, and Kaepernick, outplayed Cam Newton in a battle between two of the best quarterbacks in the world at that time. And the Niner defense didn't give up a single point in the second half. Cam Newton was sacked 5 times and threw 2 picks. So just a really well played all around game for the Niners. For number 9, I have the last game at the Stick, Niners Falcons 34-24. The Niners were 10-4 going in. The Falcons were 4-10, but this game mattered more than just trying to get the 11th win of the season, but also was the last home game at Candlestick. And everyone remembers it for Navarro Bowman's interception. But shout out to Patrick Willis, who had 18 tackles that game. Bowman had 11 tackles also. But then Matt Ryan to Tony Gonzalez with 2 minutes left. They get the onside kick. That makes it 27-24. So with a minute left to go, I don't think anyone at Candlestick was sure that they were going to win the game. So when Bowman gets that interception off the deflection and takes it to the house, I mean that's how you shut down a building. You know what I mean? It just makes make all of Candlestick shake and send it home. And then number 8, I had January 12th, 2013, Niners beating the Packers 45-31. Kaepernick had 4 touchdowns in that game, 2 rushing, 2 passing, threw for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also ran for 181 and 2 touchdowns. Frank Gore had 119 yards rushing, 48 yards receiving. Crabtree went 9 for 119. So all their big dogs showed up. But to dominate against the Packers, the Packers come up a few times on my list. Spoiler alert, but the Niners beating the Packers in the 2010s is always fun because of the rivalry that was built with Young and Favre, and kind of the history those two teams have against each other. And the Niners found ways to beat the Packers quite a few times in the 2010s, and the 2013 one against the Aaron Rodgers-led Packers, where Kaepernick just absolutely dominated, was definitely one worth remembering.
Love it.
So, Ray, what do you got for 7 through 4?
Oh, you know what? I didn't give my 8. So I guess.
Oh, did you not?
I guess. Well, that was week 2019, week 12, the 37-8 rout of the Green Bay Packers, who have a few appearances in my list.
Yeah, that's going to be a general theme, I think, for all of our lists.
Yes,
I think so too.
I think so.
So there's your number 8. Why don't you go ahead and give 7 through 4 now?
Yeah. So 7 through 4 is 2019, week 17, the 26-21 against Seattle, the stop 2 game. And number 6, I've got the 2013, week 1, the 34-28 shootout against, guess who? Green Bay. The 2013, number 5 is 2013, week 16, the 34-24 win over the Atlanta Falcons, the pick at the stick that you mentioned. And at number 4, I've got the 2014 NFC wildcard game, the 23-20 win over, big surprise, Green Bay.
What about you, Rudy?
All right. At number 7, I have 49ers at the New Orleans Saints, week 14, December 8th, 2019. Final score was 48-46. At number 6, I cheated, and I have a 2-way tie. And here's my 2-way tie. Green Bay Packers at the 49ers, divisional round, January 12th, 2013, a game we've already seen come up twice on your guys' lists. And then the Cap's first playoff game, and then the classic, he put up 440 yards, and the entire Packers team was at 352. But then the second game, 49ers at Green Bay Packers the following year, wild card round, January 5th, 2014, the sleeveless game. That's my tie at number 6. At number 5, Jacksonville Jaguars at 49ers, Week 16, December 24th, 2017. Final score was 44-33. I'll get into that game when we get to that part. And then Week 4, 49ers at Seattle Seahawks, Week 17, December 29, 2019. The stop 2, Ray. I have the stop 2 in that section, but I've got it at number 4 of my greatest Niner games, and I'll explain why when we get to that part. But Candlestick Will, what about you, buddy?
All right, so at number 7, I have January 19, 2020, 49ers against the Packers, 37-20. For number 6, I have December 8th, 2019, the 49ers Saints, 48-46 game that we've already mentioned. Rudy, you just mentioned. Number 5, I have December 16th, 2012, the 49ers beating the Patriots in New England. And for number 4, I have January 5th, 2014, the 49ers beating the Packers 23-20 at Lambeau Field.
Ooh, that was good. That New England game, man. I really wanted that somewhere in here. I just could not find the right spot.
Which one?
The 49ers at New England beating Brady in New England in 2012.
Oh, that's right.
That was
40 burger.
41-34.
That was a badass game.
I was out of the country for that. I watched that in another country. That was amazing.
That was a badass game. That was such.
So Ray, why don't you break down 7 through 4?
So Seattle, I put it up there just because of the signification of the game. The NFC West was at stake. The number 1 seed was at stake, and the game really came down to one play, much like the infamous Stop 1, which was in Super Bowl 16, January 24th, 1982, the famous goal line stand between the 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals, where on 3rd and 1, Dan Bunce made the infamous stop. And even though it's funny, he got the stop on 3rd and 1, but we had another stop after that on 4th down that really solidified the goal line stance. But that one became the famous one out of all the plays. I think just because of the way it happened and went down. Perhaps it was a tough play, and it looked like it was perhaps going to go in, and ended up Dan Bunce made a great play. But again, we had a great play. Historically on our end by a rookie linebacker who also wore number 57, Dre Greenlaw. So that was a really amazing game that had me on the edge of my seat up until the very last second. And the 2013 Week 1 34-28 versus Green Bay game, this was a game where we're coming off the Super Bowl loss. Cap had taken over for Alex Smith halfway through the season, and the offense really kind of flourished under him, and it seemed to be more explosive because the league was really caught off guard with his running ability and also his powerful arm. And everyone was wondering, what was Cap going to do to really kind of build on the season from 2012. And in this game, I thought, I remember the first thing Rudy, you and I were both kind of echoing this whole deal was that we kept saying Cap got good, Cap got better, because he was 27 for 39 for 412 yards and 3 touchdowns, no picks. He outdueled Aaron Rodgers in that game, and I really thought that Cap was going to become this prolific passer from this game. Unfortunately, that's not the way the rest of his career played out. But in this game, him and Anquan Bolden just really decimated this Green Bay Packers secondary and just tore them a new one. And this game was toe-to-toe. It wasn't until the fourth quarter. Green Bay scored every time we scored, vice versa, and this was tied up until the very end until we got that final score. We scored 13 points in the fourth quarter as opposed to Green Bay 7. To pull out the victory there. And that was just an amazing way to start that season. And then 2013, for a lot of the same reasons that you already pointed out, Candlestick Will. And that's just to pick at the sticks. And to me, the big play was that they were threatening to score, and that score would have given them the lead. But Tremaine Brock made a terrific play on that one and really disrupted the throwing lane. And Namara Bowman was just at the right place at the right time and just took it to the house to really solidify the win. We already had the lead. He could have fallen down, and it would have been the same result. But the fact that he was able to get a pick six out of it in the manner which he did, and Jim Harbaugh ripped off his headset and was running down the field, and the whole crowd was into it, and it was the proper way to end a very historic stadium with so much rich NFL history and amazing games played in that game. More playoff games or more NFC Championship games in that stadium than any other in history. Someone can fact check me on that, but I think it's up there. I know it's up there, but
I know we've played in more NFC Championship games than any other team in the NFC. We've played them in the most NFC Championship games of any team.
I know we should have more Super Bowls because of that, but that's another gripe for another day. And that was. And then number 4, the 2014 NFC wildcard game, the 23-20 game. This was a game where Green Bay really played us a lot more tightly. I mean, Green Bay's always played us very well, especially in the Cap era. Those were always some pretty tight games, but in this one, it was we were in the wild card round, and Cap didn't have his best day. But he did enough on the ground and enough in the air to really get us within field goal range to edge that game out. And that was by 1 second. We waited till 1 second to get that field goal off in time. And sure enough, sent Green Bay home packing. So that is 3 losses to Green Bay. Green Bay has never been able to beat a 500 or better version of the 49ers in the Aaron Rodgers era. He's always beaten us when we've been below 500 and just a garbage team. Anytime the team has been a contender for the tournament, Rodgers is like 0 for 5, 0 for 6, something like that. It's pretty bad.
I think all those 6 are somewhere on our list.
I completely agree.
All right, what about you, Rudy?
So 49ers at New Orleans Saints is at my 7th spot. The Gauntlet. I call this game the Gauntlet. It was the final 3 games, what everyone was calling the Gauntlet. Obviously, no team had ever faced 3 teams in a row over 800, and all this late in the season. It never happened before. And so this was literally the 3-week hardest stretch. We were called the Pretenders. Everyone said all season we were pretenders. There was a lot of questions about Jimmy G, and I think it's one of his best games of the season, if not his absolute best game. This was also the second game to decide the number 1 seed for the NFC. Again, a battle we twice with Seattle and once with the Saints to decide who got the number 1 seed. And just a great game, 48-46, huge battle. Really showed that the 49ers didn't go through the gauntlet. They were the gauntlet, and that was a great feeling. I tied these games here because I really look at these Green Bay Packers, these back-to-back years against them, as 2 of Cap's absolute masterpieces. And in my opinion, arguably the 2 best games I think he might have ever played. I just loved him in the sleeveless game and loved him in that divisional round. He was just so beastly in both these games, and hard-fought games on both sides. I mean, you guys have said a lot about them. The sleeveless game to me is just his most infamous game. It goes down in history as just like the most cappiest Cap game. That season, I called this the head hunting streak. We won 9 games in a row, and had we beat Seattle in the NFC Championship, we would have been the first team ever to win all 3 road games in the playoffs, which is something no one's ever done. But this was one of final 2 games that we would win to end our streak at 9. But what a game. The sleeveless game was amazing. And then, of course, that first one was the emergence of Cap, so I can't say enough good things about that. At number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 49ers in Week 16 of 2017. Jimmy versus the Jags. This is really, to me, the start of the Kyle Shanahan, Jimmy G era. Jacksonville was widely considered to be the only real contender that had a chance of stopping the Pats that season, and pretty much everyone expected us to lose. I remember saying before the game, and I think I even said it on the GoldCast that year. I remember telling somebody, I will just be happy if the Niners can put up a couple points against this defense. If we could put up a couple touchdowns and Jimmy G doesn't look that bad, I'll be pretty happy with this game. And it ended up, we dominated 44-33 and really shocked the world. And I really, really consider this game when the history books are all said and done and closed on this era of the Niners, I really think the Shanahan-Jimmy G era starts with this game against the Jaguars. This really showed that this team had something special with this combination. And then at number 4, the stop 2, not a whole lot to say that's already hasn't been said. I'll add a couple other things to even make it even grander. This is the final game of the 100th season of the NFL, the greatest rivalry of the last decade. The entire NFC hangs in the balance. Winner takes all. Loser drops to the 5th seed. It's our first win in Seattle in 8 years, and it came down to that final play and capped off one of the best seasons in 49er history. And so, that's just to add even more relevance to it. I put that game at number 4 because it was just such a big game. I'm actually kind of surprised that it showed up a little higher in your guys' lists. But yeah, that's why that's where I have those games. Just in terms of the importance, and 3 left to go. Candlestick Will, what about you, buddy?
So at number 7, I had the January 19, 2020 game, the Niners and Packers, 37-20. Just the sheer dominance in which the Niners just destroyed the Packers, got them to the Super Bowl. The Raheem Mostert game, 220 yards and 4 touchdowns, out rushing the Packers 285-62. The Richard Sherman interception to seal the game. Just everything about that game was just, the Niners are going to dominate for a lot of years going forward. Like, the message that game sent was, it doesn't matter who we have at running back. It doesn't matter who we have on defense. It doesn't matter who we have on offense. We're just going to shut people down. And I know that the last sentence of the season wasn't how everyone wanted it to be, but the feeling coming out of that game was just one of sheer domination. And holy shit, here come the Niners is kind of the feeling I think every Niner fan had, was like, not only are we here, but we're here to stay. I think, as what you just mentioned about the Jaguar game, that was, what could be the start of it. This was an absolute sledgehammer of a game to just say, no, we're going to be here for a while. At number 6, I have that gauntlet game, Niners and Saints, 48-46, to finish off that streak where you dominate the 8-2 Packers, then you lose by a field goal to the 9-2 Ravens, and then you find a way to beat the Saints by 2 points when you're both coming in 10-2, and you take on those 3 teams and play them as well as you can. The Saints took a 1-point lead with a minute left, so to get the game winner with 2 seconds left from Robbie Gould was an incredible way to end that 3-game stretch. The George Kittle run, that everyone remembers, it's a Niner fan. But I think the other part of that game was the fact that you had Jimmy G and Drew Brees go head-to-head. Jimmy went 26 for 35 for 349 yards and 4 touchdowns. So the same quarterback that didn't do anything in that dominant conference championship game against the Packers, because he didn't have to, because they ran the ball so dominantly, ended up looking like Drew Brees as a quarterback when they needed him to throw. So I think that the fact that they could do both of those things the same year also says a lot about the future, but also why that game, I think, stands out to me. For number 5, I have the December 16th, 2012 game, Niners and Patriots. I know you guys were saying that you wanted to have it on your list. To me, to go into New England and win any time of the year is pretty significant. And to me, in some ways, it's bigger than some of the playoff wins they've had. and proof by the fact that I have it number 5, and I have some playoff wins lower than it, and I have some playoff wins even in honorable mention. But the Niners were 9-3-1 coming in. The Patriots were 10-3. To put up 41 points on a Bill Belichick defense is one thing. This was Kaepernick's 5th ever start. By comparison, it was Brady's 173rd start.
Damn.
Kaepernick went 14 of 25 for 221 yards and 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. He only threw 10 touchdowns all season because he only started like 7 games, and he only threw 3 picks that year, and one of them was in this game. But he had a 108.5 quarterback rating, only got sacked 1 time. Brady had a very Brady game initially, 35 for 45 for 443 yards, but only 1 touchdown and 2 picks. He only threw 8 picks all season, and he threw 34 touchdowns. So he had the 4th best touchdown total of any quarterback that year, and he only threw 1 touchdown in that game. So despite 34 points, he only threw 1 touchdown himself. He was sacked 3 times. So, both Kaepernick and Brady basically had a 63% completion percentage for the season, but Brady threw for 4,800 yards on the year, 34 touchdowns, only 8 picks. So to have a 1 touchdown, 2 interception game against the Niners that day says a lot about what the Niners defense actually did, even though they gave up 34 points. But to go into New England and win is, to me, already, to do that anytime this decade is something that should be remembered. And then for number 4, I have the January 5th, 2014 game between the Niners and Packers, where the Niners were 12-4 and beat the 8-7-1 Packers 23-20. For some reason, because the NFL is stupid, they were on the road. And for some reason they have to have division winners get home games when their record's terrible. But they also won it on a game-winning walk-off field goal by Phil Dawson. Aaron Rodgers, who won the MVP the following season, he only played 9 games that year, but he went 17 for 26 for 177 yards and 1 touchdown, was sacked 4 times. So to shut down one of the game's absolute best quarterbacks on the road, in the playoffs at Lambeau is pretty special. So that's why I had it number 4.
Nice.
All right, Ray, what do you have for honorable mention?
Not much. I have the New England game that you mentioned, just for the sheer fact of beating Brady. Although now in retrospect, I think having Brady's loss in the list would have had greater impact and greater satisfaction. But but it is what it is. And then I also have the what is it? The Raiders game that you mentioned earlier, Rudy. That was a great game. Even though
Battle of the Bay, baby.
Yeah, the significance of the season was, really wasn't much. But I have that game. And then I also had the Jimmy Garoppolo game against the Bears, where he led the comeback that was all won by field goals by Robbie Gould, the Golden Foot. He had like 5 field goals that game, 5 or 6, something like that. It was, and he led the.
That was a fun game.
The no huddle comeback 2-minute drill drive that led to the final scores like 15-14 or 15-13 or something like that. But yeah, it was a cool game. And again, I was really impressed with Jimmy Garoppolo's ability to manage a no huddle 2-minute drill with the game on the line in a Kyle Shanahan offense, even though it was a stripped down version of it so that Jimmy could have an easier time. Still not an easy task for any quarterback. So that was the big 3 that I had.
What about you, Rudy?
So I have 6 games. I know. I managed to put in 12 games in my top 11 and then 6 honorable mentions. So number 6, Shanahan's first win, November 12, 2017, Week 10, 31-21 over the Giants. Number 5, Harbaugh's first win, September 11, 2011, Week 1, 33-17 over the Seahawks. And then the last 4 are all gut-wrenching losses that I can refuse to put in the greatest games, but I believe they deserve a mention. The 2011 NFC Championship game against the Giants, the Kyle Williams game, the Super Bowl that just passed, the 2013 NFC Championship against the Seahawks, and of course at number 1, the Har Bowl, which had a really rough start, but really felt at the end like it was going to be a classic Niner finish, pulling the game out of our ass, Joe Montana style. And unfortunately, it did not go that way. But it's the game that hurts the most. I've only seen it once ever live. I'll never see it again. But I do remember the second half of that being pretty epic. The entire game was weird, the lights shutting down, and it was just such a crazy game. And so I put that at my number 1 honorable mention, the Har Bowl. How about you, Candlestick Will? Who's your honorable mentions?
So I have the Eagles, October 2nd, 2011, their comeback. The Eagles were up 23-3.
Yeah.
With 9:30 to go in the third quarter, and the Warriors and the 49ers came back and won 24-23.
It was a badass game too.
The December 24th, 2011 game against the Seahawks. It was in Seattle. Seattle was 7-7. The Niners were 11-3, and they went into Seattle and beat them. The Packers 2019 game that you mentioned, I have, as well as the Vikings 2020 playoff win. I figured any playoff win that didn't make my top 11 should be an honorable mention, just simply because you don't get to make the playoffs that often in the NFL. And then the 4 games you just mentioned, both Super Bowl appearances in this decade and both NFC Championship losses were all games that could have easily been won had one thing gone different. The Ravens game, they were at the goal line. The Chiefs game, they were up 10 late in the game. Giants game, obviously you mentioned the Kyle Williams fumble. And the Seahawks, they threw a pick in the end zone right at the end of the game. So there's, the ball moves a couple inches differently in all 4 of those games, and we might be talking about what could be the actual top 4 of our list, which could have been those 4 games.
Yeah,
totally.
I think if the Niners beat the Giants that day, if the Niners beat the Seahawks to win 10 straight, like you were mentioning earlier, if they beat the Chiefs with the way the Chiefs were playing, with the way Mahomes played that day, and if you beat the Ravens in the Super Bowl, if they give the ball to Gore just once, or if they, make any different decision on what kind of pass play they run, in the way that game would have ended, that's easily the top 4 on our list. So just shout out to those 4 games. So Ray, what do you got? What's your top 3?
All right, top 3. I've got the 2020 NFC Championship game that you've already mentioned, the 37-20 win over Green Bay. That's the 4th Green Bay mention here. And then I have the 2013 NFC Divisional Playoff round against, guess who? The Green Bay Packers, the 45-31. That was the Kaepernick in 5th gear game. And then at number 1, I've got the 2011 NFC Divisional Playoff game against the New Orleans Saints, the Alex Smith game, the 36-32 win.
The catch 3.
The catch.
What about you,
3.
Rudy?
Yep.
For me, I have at number 3 the NFC Championship game from January 20th, 2013, 49ers at Atlanta Falcons. At number 2, I have to admit, gentlemen, I'm a little disappointed in both of you. I've got Atlanta Falcons at the Niners, Week 16, December 23rd, 2013. Pick at the stick. That's the best. That was practically my number 1 as the best, coolest game we played in the last 10 years. It just had the magic of Candlestick, and it was an FU to the Atlanta Falcons, who used to be in this division, and it was just one more finger right in their face right before we sent them packing just a couple weeks later. But that was the game for me, man. That was the game.
See,
oh,
for
well,
me,
I guess I'm sorry, not a couple weeks later. That was the year before. But it to me was just the most exciting game that we played in the last 10 years at Candlestick, besides my number 1. And that, to me, is why I put it at number 2. I was really shocked you guys didn't have that way higher.
It wasn't a playoff game, so that's why I couldn't put it in 3.
We both had it on our list, right?
No, yeah, it's on everyone's list.
Mine
It's
was
on
number
everyone's
5. Is this up there?
Okay. So yours was number 5. Where was mine? Mine was was it 10?
10, yeah.
No, it was 9. Mine was 9.
I like how on each list it got further down the line though. It wiggled its way down.
But to beat a 4-win team in the regular season and make the top 11, I think says all the same reasons you had at number 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm,
right? Like all 3 of us had them beating a random 4-win team on our top 11. So that I think that goes to show you why not only why you had it number 2, but why it was on all 3 of our lists, because it was absolutely one that belonged on anyone's top 11.
Yeah, one of the things that we and I'll talk about it more when we explain it, but and then my number 1, just like your number 1, Ray, New Orleans Saints at the Niners, the catch 3, baby. The catch 3, the best game we have played in the last 10 years for me, the catch 3 has got to be number 1 for me. That was the one.
All right, so here's my top 3. So I've got the January 20th, 2013 game, Niners with Falcons.
Yes, we have it the same one.
28-24, their first road to the Super Bowl this decade. For number 2, I've got the December 28th, 2019 game against the Seahawks, the Dre Greenlaw game.
Yes, good choice.
And then at number 1, and this might be a top 11 first, I've got the January 14th, 2012 game, Niners and Saints.
Yes.
Catch 3.
Yes.
So this might be the first time all 3 of us had the exact same number 1.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. And you and I were almost identical. We had the same 3 and the same 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. That's excellent.
So Ray, break down your top 3.
All right. So the 2020 NFC Championship game was again us making the statement where Green Bay could only get 12 points better in the same year, and as so many other pros pointed out, it's just a really bad matchup between these two teams. You have a derivative coach that kind of knows and uses the Kyle Shanahan style, but obviously Kyle Shanahan is far superior with that style of offense, and it really showed in this game, not only with schematically on how these teams execute the game plans, but more importantly just the way the talent gelled together and came together. But I mean, credit to Matt, what was his name? Matt, the two brothers, the head coach for the Green Bay Packers that year, who's still the head coach. Anyways, Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur, for taking Green Bay, putting Green Bay back on the map the way he did, certainly credit. But, Kyle Shanahan just proved why he is still the master and why he bested him 2-0 that season. And both of those games were absolute routs, all by the same exact score, 37 in both of those games on this list. And then the 2013 NFC divisional round, this is just where Cap just goes off. I mean, Cap absolutely he just steamrolled this team on the ground with a record-setting 181 yards, the 2 scores, the dapping that he was doing in that game, the kissing of the bicep. It was all earned. I remember, specifically Clay Matthews just being dumbfounded because he just really didn't have an answer as to when Cap was going to run and when he was going to pull it and throw it. He just was frozen on a lot of those plays and bit the big one, especially on that big touchdown run, the first one. And that was just kind of the big tree. The big 3 was Cap, Gore, and Crabtree during the Harbaugh era in the offense, and also Anquan Boldin too. Anquan Boldin and Crabtree were both excellent wide receivers. Anquan Boldin being more of the possession receiver, and Crabtree being more of the the big play receiver. But that was just a tremendous game. I just remember watching that. I was in a bar, and we were just going crazy because I'd never seen scrambling like that. I mean, the last person that scrambled like that was Steve Young. So to see Cap do it in the manner in which he did it, where it really just kind of just decimated Green Bay, and the game was tight. It wasn't a blowout by any stretch, although we ended up winning by two possessions, but it was a close game up until the very end. And that was exciting. And then, of course, 2011, for a lot of the reasons that you guys would probably have there, is just to, the significance of the catch three, being back in the playoffs for the first time in I don't know how many years, and Alex Smith, the quiet pro who just kind of sat there with his head down and dealt with, I don't know, half a dozen different offensive coordinators and finally was able to put it together under Harbaugh and really shined when the light was on him and the time was to that it was time to really kind of turn on the juice. Alex Smith answered the call. I can't impress upon you how impressed I was with him and just how shocked I was. I mean, even he was still unable to top 300 yards in that game, only 299, but he did have 3 scores, 0 touchdowns, including that big scramble at the end with the pull and the boot run off the left side there for the big score that just caught him off guard. And then, of course, the infamous Vernon Davis, who also had a killer day, 180 yards for 2 scores. It was just an amazing game. I remember we were on our feet, and this one just went down to the wire. That last the score changes in the fourth quarter was just insane. Edge of your seat, just you couldn't have asked for a better game. And to me, that was just, I was so happy for Alex Smith to finally just get a significant win under his belt in a big moment and just really going up against, again, toe to toe with a quarterback that is going to go down in the Hall of Fame as one of the all-time greats. And this is Drew Brees in his prime. Just only a few years removed from a Super Bowl win. So this is prime time Drew, and for Alex Smith to play the way he did and the rest of the team to do what they did, especially the Justin Smith grabbing the jersey and bull rushing and grabbing the jersey of Drew Brees to disrupt that throw towards the end of the game. That's just a tremendous play. So yeah,
and wasn't that like 3 sacks in a row right there? I think there was like 3 sacks in a row or 3 out of 4.
I think it was back to back. I think Ahmad Brooks got one and then Justin Smith got one, or vice versa.
Well, and he took that lineman with him.
Yeah, he bull rushed him into the line and then was only able to grab Drew Brees' jersey, but was enough to bring him down.
Yeah, that was.
Wait, so Ahmad Brooks was allowed to touch Drew Brees? I didn't know
that. Oh, that's another infamous one game too. Man, I'm still mad about that game.
I'm surprised that one didn't make our list.
Right.
So, Rudy, what do you got for your top 3? Break it down for us.
So, at number 3, 49ers at the Atlanta Falcons, the NFC Championship, our first trip back to the Super Bowl. I remember this overwhelming feeling of elation, and I think that's why all three of these games, for me, it's the emotion I felt at the end. It's just an overwhelming sensation of just I don't know, like that feeling that the Niners give you, that they're just the greatest team on the planet Earth, and they're just capable of magic in a way that no one else is. They're down 17-0. They get a little bit of juice in the second half. Cap puts up 14 points, but they're still down 24-14 at the end of the first half, and it's looking rough. And then the second half comes, and the Falcons never score again. That defense locks it down. The Niners come back to win the game, 28-24. And that it was just the feeling of us finally going back. They hadn't been there since I was 14 years old, and so it was just an amazing feeling to see that the Niners were all the way back in the Super Bowl. And I remember the year before when we lost to the Giants, I remember telling everybody that night. We went and saw a Wu-Tang Clan show. I'll never forget this with a bunch of my buddies who happened to be from New York. That was even worse. But I remember telling them, all of them, I said, we're going to the Super Bowl next year. I just know it. I can feel it in my bones. The Niners are going next year, and we did. And it was all year I felt that. From the moment that season ended all the way back to the start of that next season, I kept saying, the Niners are going back. I just believed it. I could feel it. And so that was it was a great game, and really, it was the coronation of that team and that era, and it just felt like I was just like, it was just so nice to be right. Number 2, as I already mentioned, pick at the stick. I can't really say too much that already hasn't been said. The one thing I will say that was really great about that Navarro Bowman interception, which you guys have kind of touched on, but he's the reason that Atlanta recovered that onside kick, because it touched his leg. It touched Navarro Bowman's leg, and he wasn't able to get the ball, and that's the reason they were even in that position to score. And then for Navarro Bowman to make up for the special teams, for that Kyle Williams-esque play, and get that interception. Harbaugh said it was the loudest he'd ever heard Candlestick. I would argue it's probably one of the loudest cheers they've ever had, dating all the way back to either to the catch 3 or probably the original catch. I mean, you want to talk about loud. That stadium and the loudness. I was in my house jumping up and down, screaming at the top of my lungs. I was going crazy. It was just the elation, again, the feeling of that game. I can't, these 3 games for me are imprinted in my mind as just the most elation I've ever felt. And of course, number 1, the catch 3. There's not a whole lot I can say that Raymond hasn't already said. Alex Smith, Vernon Davis, who, Mike Singletary had a lot of bad things to say the previous year. It was one of Vernon Davis's best years. Those first 2 years, he really was something else. And it was just that classic Joe Montana style magic, and really solidified who this team was. I keep saying January 14, 2012. It's actually January 14, 2011. I said that for this catch game. But just a magical game. And, I've said this before, and it's just one of those questions we'll never have answered. But I really do believe that had we started Alex Smith in that Super Bowl the following year, I really think we would have won. I really actually believe that. He was very clutch, has always been very clutch. He's had ice in his veins, and I just think the Ravens would have never gotten out to the lead that they got in front of it the first half of the game with Alex Smith. But then that always begs the question: do we get to the Super Bowl if Kaepernick isn't the starting quarterback through the playoffs? And I'm not really sure. I really believed we were going no matter what, and Colin Kaepernick wasn't even a thought for us after the 2011 season. But this game really shows me, and to this day still makes me feel like we probably would have won the Super Bowl had Alex Smith started. And this game is really probably the number one reason I feel that way. Just an amazing game, and Alex Smith's greatest game. I really truly believe it's the greatest football game he's ever played as a professional, and it was a great game. And he didn't have the hottest start, but very classic Joe Montana style. He really came back in the end and really proved his mettle when it counted in that fourth quarter. And just a magical game. I'll never forget Vernon Davis running off, crying, grabbing Harbaugh, shades of the catch 2. And just a special game, and my favorite game. And I often see it come up on many lists at number 1 for the best playoff game of the decade. I've seen that a lot, especially as we were ending 2019 and going into 2020. This game came up a lot for in the top 3 or number 1 best playoff game of the decade. So I think that's pretty cool. Clearly, this game resonated with the NFL, not just the Niners. This is just one of the greatest playoff games ever played.
Yeah, I think fans of football really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Candlestick Will?
So for my 3, I have the same 3 and the same one that you did, and I'm not the only one that has the Dre Greenlaw game. But so just a couple things I'd add: the Niners beating the Falcons in Atlanta. The Falcons were 14-3. And were favored, and the Niners go in there. They beat them 28-24 to get to the Super Bowl. Frank Gore, 21 carries, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. Cap was 16 for 21 for 233 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions. Vernon Davis had a big day, 5 catches for 106 yards and a touchdown. So their 3 best players played their best, on what essentially was the biggest stage, NFC Championship game. And it might be sentimental if you're looking at when you're starting to make lists of like this was their first trip to the Super Bowl that decade, so it's hard not to put it really high. But it was just a really well played game, and I think when you look at what are the best games of the Niners, then you have to look at games where all the best players do well. So that was one of the reasons that was higher on my list than some other games. For number 2, the Niners beating Seattle in Seattle. Niners are 12-3 going in. Seahawks are 11-4. the winner of this game is going to get a bye and be a top seed. The loser is going to be a wild card and have to go on the road. So the stakes are as high as it gets for any regular season game ever. To have a goal line stand like they did was incredible. The fact that the Seahawks had a delay of game is the funniest thing in the history of this decade, especially for a team that Pete Carroll coaches that's supposed to be well coached. That you have a Niners fan base who can't stand the Seahawks, and for them to royally screw up so poorly is hilarious, and I think gets lost in the Dre Greenlaw moment because the Seahawks likely score, or at least it's going to be easier for them to score. Obviously, any time a team has a goal line stand, you could make the case that they wouldn't have scored regardless. But the fact that they lost 5 yards in that goal line stand is hilarious to me. But Dre Greenlaw's tackle, the fact that it's the same number as Buns, the fact that it looked identical to Buns, the way it was right at the goal line, it's going to be etched in the memory of every Niner fan that watched that game, the same way that Buns' tackle was. And to your point, Ray, Buns' tackle wasn't the last play of the game or the last play of the stand, but the fact that it was literally right at the goal line is just an incredible visual for stopping someone inches away from pay dirt. So, Dre Greenlaw doesn't have to do a single thing the rest of his career, and he'll be a Niner legend forever, and in the same way that Buns is. And I think that in and of itself makes that game even more special. But the fact that it was in Seattle against the rival of all rivals that had such an impact on who had to play where in the playoffs is you can't understate that. And then we all have the same number one. The only thing I'll mention that we didn't touch on as that specifically, but you guys kind of alluded to it, was just how bonkers the last 7.5 minutes of the game was. Because in the fourth quarter, 23-17, 7:36 to play, Niners ahead at home, trying to hold off this high-powered offense of the Saints. And Darren Sproles scores a 44-yard touchdown to go up by 1 with 4 minutes left. So any Niner fan who's like, we're definitely going to win this game, suddenly is like, oh, crap, that's right, Drew Brees is pretty good. And then the Alex Smith 28-yard touchdown run to make it 29-24 with 2 minutes left, and then not to get the 2-point conversion is like, okay, well, we got the lead at least, but this game isn't over because Drew Brees can still do something. And then, like in 30 seconds, the Saints score on a 66-yard touchdown to Jimmy Graham.
Ugh, the missed tackle, horrible tackling on that play. I was so pissed.
So it's just, I mean, when you mentioned, Rudy, that this comes up on top lists, I think it's because of these 4 plays that there aren't that many NFL games where you have just slinging touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. So to have Sproles score a 44-yard touchdown, Smith get a 28-yard run, Graham get a 66-yard touchdown, and then to cap it off with a touchdown with 9 seconds to go to Vernon Davis' 14-yard touchdown pass that looked identical in some ways to the Terrell Owens catch. The reaction from Vernon Davis was identical to Terrell Owens' catch. It's like anyone who's a football fan who doesn't have any skin in the game, who isn't a Saints fan, isn't a Niner fan, is loving that last 7.5 minutes. And because a 23-17 game in the fourth quarter is not necessarily memorable.
No, right? It was kind of a typical Niner game of that era where teams kind of are hanging in there, but the defense is so stout that one possession is good enough for that Harbaugh team.
Well, and I just thought of this, but this was the Pierre Thomas game, right? Where he basically died.
Yeah,
had to be resuscitated on the field. Yeah. So I mean, the game was a hard hitting game.
I shouldn't laugh at
that. Well, and he didn't actually die, so it's okay. It's fine. I mean, all NFL players have CTE, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, but the fact that those four touchdowns happened, Saints Niners in a 4 minute span, is in some ways, I don't have stats in front of me, but I don't know if that's ever happened before, where there have been 4 scores in 4 minutes, like that, to where a 23-17 game suddenly becomes a 36-32, shootout with 4 minutes left. So for what it was in a lot of ways a regular game in the playoffs became an Arena League game, with 4 minutes left. It's hard not to be overwhelmed with excitement about a game like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it was a real great game, and I think the significance of all the games we had. You know what I noticed too, and I was curious about this. Not a single Tom Sula or Chip Kelly game made it onto anybody's lists. I'm not surprised, but I wasn't sure. This was a strictly Shanahan Harbaugh only top 11 list.
We had to focus on wins, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I mean, it's cute and all when a team almost wins, but sometimes winning matters a little bit more. And I think one thing we noticed with our list is that most of these games were playoffs or games that led to the playoffs. So when you have a team that's had as much success as the Niners have in the last 10 years, I know Niner fans might not look at this decade as the most successful because they don't have any rings, but they have a lot of playoff wins. They have a lot of they have 2 Super Bowl appearances, which is more than most teams have had this decade. So there's been a lot of Niner success this decade, even if they don't have any of the Lombardi trophies to show for it.
4 NFC championships 4 NFC championship appearances in the last 10 seasons is fucking nuts, and the closest thing we have on this side to the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing. When I made this list, I realized that when I was putting playoff games in my honorable mention, that says something about the decade that they had.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great decade. It was a tough decade because we couldn't seal the deal, but overall, way better than the first 10 years of this century. Way better than the first 10 years of this century.
Oh yeah,
that's true. Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, 2000 to 2009 would be a much more embarrassing list. That week 2 win where they kind of sort of beat a bad team. That's
yeah, that's it.
That had to make my list because we didn't win much.
Very true. Raymond, any final thoughts from you?
Just that I think it speaks volumes about this casting crew when we all select the appropriate game for the number 1 spot on this particular list. I think you can't say enough about that game and how awesome it was to watch in the final quarter.
Mm-hmm. It was a great run, and that's without question. Like you said, it's no doubt the number 1, and I'm sure this game will return. I'm sure this number 1 game will return when we have our full Bay Area top 11 tournament of the greatest games of the last 10 years. I am sure the Catch 3 will find itself in contention again for a high spot on that top 11 list. I have no idea where yet, but it'll be back. It's going to come back for sure. All right. Any final thoughts from you, Candlestick Will?
Yeah, just I think when someone asks you what the last 10 years was like for the Niners, you say, well, we beat the Saints a lot, we beat the Seahawks a few times, and we beat the hell out of the Packers all decade.
Yeah. God, the Packers. The Packers couldn't win a single game in this decade against a playoff contending Niners team.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. It's like, they obviously didn't beat the Seahawks all the time, because the Seahawks are a damn good team too. But they did have some signature wins against them, even if that NFC Championship game one still stings. But they had some big wins against them. They had some big wins against the Saints, and then man, they slapped the hell out of the Packers. So that just the the repeat customers of those three teams was the thing that stood out for me when making this list.
Yeah, me too. I felt the same way. I was like, man, it just seems like the Packers, the Saints, and the Seahawks just keep showing up over and over and over again on these lists. But those were the best games. What can we say? Those were.
I think that's the other thing too, is that like you had the Jaguar game, and one of the things that you mentioned that I think stood out to me was that it was the fact that you had no expectations going into that game because the Jaguars defense was so dominant that year, and the Niners were still just getting to know each other. And so the fact that they went in and just smacked them around was like where you thought they would be and where they ended up in that game. That jump was bigger than most for all the games that you put on your list. And sometimes that's the narrative around a game. When Kaepernick beat Cam Newton head to head, there was so much talk about who was the better quarterback and who would be the better quarterback going forward, going into that game. So when Kaepernick outplayed Cam Newton in Carolina, that narrative then attaches itself to that game. When Kaepernick could, in essence, even though Brady threw for over 400 yards, Kaepernick outplayed Brady in New England. So it's like the fact that also was, it's like, here's some kid getting his fifth ever start against the best quarterback in the world, and he beats him on the road in a stadium that Brady never loses in. It's like those narratives matter more than just what the final score was or just where it was in the season. And I think that's what makes these lists so cool, is that, a random comeback win against the Eagles, maybe didn't make our list, made my honorable mention, but it's like, that's the kind of game that started the Harbaugh era.
Mm-hmm.
So in reality, if we have a revisionist history of this list or look at this list again, that Eagles game might have mattered a whole lot more than we gave it credit for, because of how much that win led to more wins, and that kind of thing. So sometimes it's not just so much the game in the NFC Championship game that matters more. It's that had they not come back in that Eagles game, maybe they don't go on a run that year, that kind of thing. So, sometimes when we peel back some of the layers of why a game should be on a list or not, it's those narratives around the story that was going on before the game and how things happened afterwards that really makes a huge difference.
Totally. I totally agree with that. Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, good stuff. We will be back next week with the top 11 greatest Golden State Warriors games. And then as Candlestick Will already mentioned, the following week we will do the SF Giants games, and then our top 11 tournament. What are the top 11 best games of the decade for all of our three major teams, the Niners, the Warriors, and the Giants? Who gets on the final list? This is kind of our version of March Madness. This is our brackets. This is how we're doing it. So tune in. This is going to be some fun stuff. And so concludes another edition of the Top 11 podcast. We are the voice of the Bay. I'm your host, Rudy III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the First, baby.
And our esteemed co-host,
Candlestick Will.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same Top 11 time, same Top 11 channel.
This is the GoldCast.